The Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians is pleased to present this audio-video replay. Please remember to like our videos and subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive notifications of future content.
Welcome, everyone, to what I believe is going to be a very interesting presentation on quality of life after one loses their vision or has any vision disruptions or changes, because it doesn't always happen all at once and it doesn't always happen just a little bit, but it's all about quality of life. And to take us through this journey, I would like to introduce Joshua Simmons.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time on your busy day to come and listen to this little talk, which we'll be discussing how our ability to change perspectives could improve quality of life following vision loss. A little bit about myself. I'm a psychologist in private practice. I've been so for over 20 years. While I do have RP and now I'm considered legally blind, having the lived experience and being a psychologist, I will need to preface by saying I am not a vision rehabilitation specialist. I'm not an orientation and mobility person. I am, I guess, a vision rehabilitation adjacent type of professional in this world. So I have a unique perspective, but I think I can offer a little bit of a different take of things, given that I think much of what we'll be talking about today could be used above and beyond vision rehab, but I'll let you all decide that. So, with that being said, I will move on to our journey. And today's journey should be about 45 minutes. I've asked Marcia to poke me in the virtual ribs to make sure that I stay on task. And I would also encourage her that if I start to speed up too much, then maybe it's not a great pace. You think that those might be kind of needing to have me slow down. Or if I start to go into a drone that I'm not speaking into my microphone properly, please, Marcia, let me know, and I'll make sure I'm more clear. So today's journey is going to touch on a few things so that we understand the terms that we're talking about. So we will be talking about things that have to do with vision rehabilitation. Some of us may have a lot or little touch on vision rehabilitation. We'll be talking about this idea called response shift, which is a fancy term for how we adjust and change our perspectives. And how that is understood will also take a bit of time to go over. What else did I have here? I'd like to talk about quality of life, and I'd like to also be able to kind of see on how we can make the most of our lives following vision loss and during the adaptation process, which is often lifelong. Hmm. So I know I may be preaching to the converted, given the lovely group that are with us today. But some of us may not have as much experience with the vision loss. But when we're talking about it, it's remarkable that in my look of things, that over 2.2 billion people on this planet have what would be considered a vision impairment. Now, my understanding of that is that's people who probably have glasses as well, all different types of, vision that needs correction. In terms of chronic illnesses and diseases, they're all lumped into that, but it is a very significant amount. So, I mean, if you need to explain to someone how vision impairment affects their lives, most people, if you just kind of do a squint or take off their glasses, it's not hard for them to have a very brief moment of understanding what vision impairment is about. And it seems to touch on a lot of people, or people know of someone who has a vision impairment. Um, there are many conditions that I think I heard someone talking about earlier. These conditions, many of them progress over time, deteriorate, and in the idea of vision rehab, people are often needing adjust, readjust again. And that in and of itself can be quite frustrating. So the idea of a quality of life can sometimes be lightning in a bottle. You think you got it, and then all of a sudden, you don't. You have to readjust again. I think some of that idea will be addressed through or at least a way of how to deal with that will be addressed in the course of the conversation. Um, Let me see here. And I think what will become quite evident is that vision loss affects much, much more than eyesight. hmm So, so now that we're on slide 4, what is vision rehab? So, in the strictest sense of the term, it deals a lot with, how to get around, how to be independent, things like orientation and mobility, things that are dealing with assistive technologies, things that help us get around in the world, um, things that help us provide a sense of community, a sense of belonging. Uh, and the emotional support that goes along with it. So a lot of it could be summarized in much of it is functioning. Much of it is help us to become functioning in the world. And vision rehab does a good job, in my opinion. I've been doing vision rehab for all my life since I was 7 years old. And I guess everyone has their own experiences. We'll have a discussion piece at the end to see how some of this does or does not come from your perspective, but I'll be looking forward to hearing your thoughts a bit later on. So I'm going to get to it early. Usually people like to leave the suspense. I don't think I'd make a very good filmmaker. So everyone likes Polanski and Spielberg can keep their jobs. I'm going to get to the big question early. So basically, knowing rehabilitation, how do we know it's working? As I mentioned, a lot of it's functioning. Uh, you know, um, where did I want to mention here? Better, yeah, better functioning. Is that what it is? Is it better, feeling a sense of community? Is it a better quality of life? Mm, we'll discuss. I'm not going to answer my own question just yet. So, um, So this may not be too difficult for people to imagine given the crowd, but as a reflective piece for, let's just think like you're thinking of, I can't drive anymore. I can't see faces. I can't, dress myself the way I used to. Can't see colors. It's harder to read. This is tough. What does quality of life mean to you in those moments that these kinds of things are affecting us? Um, hmm. As we're kind of going through this, the next slide is quality of life is really personal. Um, that there are some basic tenets of what we would understand quality of life to mean. But there is a large component that quality of life is not very easily agreed upon amongst, even between two people. I think there would be a significant difference between what one person would consider quality of life from another. I'm sure one person who has macular degeneration, who has all the same scores of someone who would be considered have a macular degeneration, would have a very different understanding of what they would consider quality of life from one person to another. Um, Much of the vision rehabilitation for quality of life is looking at independence, looking at the fostering and maintaining of relationships, a sense of purpose, um, a general feeling of I'm sorry, a general feeling of enjoyment, um, and finding meaning. I think that's what we're going to kind of come to the crux of this. Is much of quality of life is meaning based, and how much does that meaning get touched within the vision rehabilitation process when it comes to formal vision rehab? Okay. Let's look at our next slide. So, the puzzles that researchers found, and this may come as no surprise, but you go in for an eye exam and you're like, my vision is terrible. And you come in weeks later and you say, my vision is still terrible and it's stable. But they do an assessment for your quality of life and you feel that your quality of life is better. Now, I'm not saying after the first, initial diagnosis, there's certainly a process of grieving and things are difficult, and we'll get into that. But the puzzle is like, well, if my objective vision is really not doing very well, why or how is a person's quality of life perceived better for themselves? And oddly enough, even when it gets worse, when it deteriorates, a person can still say that my quality of life is good, if not better than it was when it was stable earlier. And that's left researchers, really puzzled. And how do we capture this idea, this feeling that people are getting, and what's happening here? Um, because other people certainly may benefit from it. So, ta-da! This is the notion of response shift. The idea that I have here is basically the notion of when an individual's subjective experience changes. And it could basically encompass a whole bunch of stuff. It encompasses your values. It encompasses what your expectations are, a number of things. And these are all very personal, cultural, your upbringing. There's all kinds of things that come with that package of response shift. So how you responded to a notion of your quality of life earlier in your diagnosis of the vision problem, that response shifts to something different. The priorities change, the calibration changes, the way you conceptualize changes. And this can happen with or without vision rehab. But then one of the goals of vision rehab is to touch on this point. If anything, it makes it easier if you could touch on this point. I would say a lot of vision rehab professionals tackle with this difficult, intangible through the vision rehab process. And it's difficult because it is so uh, individual, different from one person to another. So this is the notion of the idea of changing the idea of your perceptions. If you're changing your perceptions, you're changing the way you view quality of life in a nutshell. So I like examples. They make life a little easier to kind of put things into perspective. So I never knew this because I never drove. I never took that leap of faith in my abilities, despite me having really good visual acuities with a 20% field for much of my life. Now it's much worse. But let's say, for example, before vision loss, independence was like, I can drive. I can get to where I want to go with this motor vehicle. It makes me feel a sense of independence. But independence after vision loss may change. Vision loss, after vision loss, it may mean that I can get to a place safely. I can travel independently. How I get there is less relevant. It's more of changing the notion of independence, conceptualized differently. So the notion is, well, what happened? Basically the idea is your response shift happened. This individual notion of response shift that is unique to you happened. Um, so why the term response shift? Well, because our standards change, our values change, our expectations change. These are all fluid things. These aren't things that are static. When you have a lens in your eye, it provides you a visual acuity of X, Y, or Z. But when we have this idea of our own internal subjective experience, our standards, our values, our expectations, among other things, are not so fixed. And response shift tries to figure out what is that about. So I've kind of alluded to it. There are three parts to this response shift idea. The three parts that I have found, and this is not unique to me, this is found in a research article that hopefully someday will be published in the British Journal of Vision Impairment, which looks at response shift for all kinds of things. It looks at response shift in terms of chronic pain. It looks at response shift in terms of surgeries. It looks at mental health. So this notion of response shift is not unique to vision impairment or vision loss. I'm just using it um, as a terminology to help us better understand what's going on inside of ourselves. So, as I digress. So I mentioned earlier there was recalibration, there was prioritization, and there's reconceptualization. Don't worry, I'll give us a little bit more details of what I'm talking about. So the first one, recalibration. What do I mean by recalibration? Basically, it you could kind of peel away a little bit from the beginning of it, from calibrating, from fine tuning. So it's basically, if we were going to look at it, we are trying to change the notion of what independence, for example. So if we look at in that before vision loss, you would say, let me see here, before vision loss equals doing things all by myself. And after vision loss, the independence maybe changes towards um, a shift of I can do things by asking for help. Maybe there's an independence where I take my time. Maybe there's a part of it that I don't need to do it quite so um, uh, alone. Independence doesn't mean that you're losing your sense of agency. There are things that you can do that don't need to have you do something always on your own. We live in a society that prioritizes independence, and my feeling is that we are perhaps far more interdependent than we would like to realize. And I think that's the way as human beings we function best. Um, so I really wanted to put the idea that the independence um, through the available resources at any given time, it's fluid, it changes. What you would like to do for independence may not be possible based on the skills you have at any given time at a resource center, what skills you know. If you don't have an area where you can walk safely on a sidewalk, you're going to have to adjust what your notions are for independence. So these is the idea of a calibration process that goes through the first part of response shift. Prioritization, or the reprioritization, which is the second tier of what we're looking at for response shift. So when we're looking at trying to change the way of our perspectives, I am going to prioritize what matters most to me. What matters most to me within a given context, but for me, what matters most in my particular situation for what I would value as a quality of life. So I prioritize initially being independent, but after vision loss, I find my life is a bit too lonely, and I think I want to be with people more. And it's funny, I used to like to do things on my own. I didn't need as many people around me, but you know what? I've become a slightly different person. I think I like to be around people more, and I like the feeling of community. So you reprioritize the need to do things on your own quite so much, and you kind of reprioritize going to that community event more because you like the feeling of being engaged in something bigger than yourself. Hmm. This is my favorite. I'm a meaning-based guy. I'm meaty meaning. So it's basically when you're changing the underlining meaning of, well, it's caught in the loop, meaning upon meaning upon meaning. So basically, if we're looking at something as simple as reading for most people, with their eyes working well, means reading print in a newspaper. And I can't tell you how many people I've met, friends and colleagues, and clients who, have a hard time shifting from the notion of, reading is not just, looking at the printed text. It can be braille, it could be a large print. You change the meaning of reading as how do I acquire information? Like, I don't care how I get it. I want to know things. And sometimes for some people, it's hard. And I'm not going to dismiss. There was a large part of me that was grieving for a long time on not being able to read articles with my eyes. That experience of internalizing rather than hearing is something very special. But at the end of the day, my meaning is that I wanted to gather information. I wanted to be in the loop. I wanted to know things. So that's what helped me get over that stubbornness, I would say. Mm. I have RP. I think stubbornness kind of comes with the territory. So adaptation and adjustment for this next slide. So we're basically looking at the initial feelings of dealing with any type of vision loss when we're thinking about response shift. What are we response shifting from? What are the symptoms that we're dealing with? We're dealing with grief. We're dealing with frustration. We're dealing with depression, anxiety, fear of the unknown, among many things. I don't pretend that this is an exhaustive list, but this is just the beginning. I think any of us here that have a vision loss and that have had to try to deal with this, again, I think I'm speaking to the converted, but this probably resonates with everyone. So I'm not saying anything new. This is what response shift has to contend with. The so what are we dealing with here? Again, not an exhaustive list, but the fears that and the all those emotions are trying to are have been riled up by these particular issues. Identity, self-esteem. Why do I say that? I say identity particularly because how we see ourselves, and I put quotation marks in see, takes a fundamental shift in losing your sight, all kinds of things, and how we understand ourselves, the stigma of being unable to see things that are common. The notion of a shared reality is a huge thing that I've come to understand when it comes to losing sight. That sense of a visual community, that sense of belonging. Don't you see that? Can't you see that? And that's often words said by everyone who has ever had a vision problem. And those that are without problem visual are basically living in a shared reality which is being experienced within their head. I mean, let's make no mistake here. I'm going to get all heady about it. Is that vision is not basically outside. We experience vision in our heads. So the what we're seeing through the optic fields of the photons hitting our retina, going to the back of the brain, this out external world that we perceive is creating identity that we internalize. And when someone is telling you, can't you see that? Don't you see that? You're being shut out and you're losing that sense of that shared community, and it impacts your self-esteem. Not only does it affect your self-esteem, I mean, you're losing employment, which is, I think it's like 50%, if not more, for people early in their lives that they have to kind of deal with that transition. It can be very, very difficult. Um, the loss of independence, which I talked about earlier. The poor self-esteem, which is often equated with that. And the mental health issues are rampant. I mean, notions of suicide, post-traumatic stress, I wanted to touch about the post-traumatic stress because this is a bit of an interesting one. Vision loss in and of itself is not defined as a post-traumatic stress disorder, which is interesting because I was like, well, what's that about? It's basically um, none of a sensory loss or losing an arm or that kind of disability in and of itself is not defined as a post-traumatic stress. What is post-traumatic stress is our response to that stress and the difficulties of overcoming that stress, loss of an arm, loss of vision, chronic pain due to a traumatic event. Um, that that is where the difficulty comes in. If I fell in the metro, because of my vision loss, that's the trauma I experience in relation to my vision loss. But the loss of a vision impairment itself, in the idea of professional mental health, is not considered. I'm open for the debate for it later if people want to comment on that. I mean, we don't live in a vacuum. And when we come up with these ideas of what's considered pathological, but in terms of what's defined as that by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. The pains and ailments and chronic illnesses in and of themselves are not considered post-traumatic stress. Again, it's how we respond to it. But I digress because there's much more to cover. So what helps? Well, I think we know that family, in my opinion, is perhaps the number one thing that could be of utmost importance. They are closest to us. They've seen us most of our lives, particularly if it's a younger person having to deal with a transition of vision loss. A good supportive family unit could be a fantastic Teflon to the slings and arrows that life has to offer. And I've seen this in many aspects, not beyond vision impairment in my private practice. A great friendship group that's supportive and welcoming. Unfortunately, there have been many times I've heard people have lost friends through the course of dealing with something like vision loss, and you get to know who your real friends are. Um, that is a sad, but unfortunately true. But good friendships can certainly help. Community engagement. You have a good core group of a social group that you attend, that you still continue to attend, regardless of your vision loss, uh, is a very important part. I would say it's almost equivalent to the family. It's your second family outside of the home, wherever community or social group you're a part of, church, mosque, cultural center, what have you. Um, so the positive role models are always a good one for helping. They don't always have to have a vision impairment themselves, but someone you feel that it can inspire. Vision rehab is supposed to be one of the best ones, and in my experience, when done right, it can be the difference between a life and death in many cases. People can get very much of despair, and there's no better place to get the kind of solid foundations of to lead a better quality of life with the functioning and the skills and that sense of being connected to people that can help you get around in the world with a sense of confidence than a good vision rehab center. And then I'll pipe my own horn and say that psychotherapy and counseling to deal with the stuff that goes on inside of you, which sometimes is not always easily accessible from the vision rehab professionals that have, maybe not quite the training, maybe they don't have the time, and maybe financially the system of Medicare and whatnot, unfortunately, have a very high statistical number on wanting to treat as many people as possible, and sometimes there may be, unfortunately, some walking wounded. Meaning that they may be mobility and they may be walking around with O&M, but they may be very sad and they may be very unhappy. And that's where counseling and psychotherapy can help fill in that gap. Um, mhm. Well, I don't think I need to tell you guys from going through my slides so far what makes things harder. The number one thing that could possibly make anything harder, and I didn't put this in rank, but after I looked at it quite a number of times, I would say being isolated is perhaps the single most devastating thing that anyone can do with a vision impairment. Um, However, it may be a mild one from an objective perspective. Subjectively, if you are isolating yourself, your mental health takes a huge nosedive, and your ability to function and get a good grip on your mental state becomes it's there's we are social creatures by nature, and isolating ourselves is a recipe for disaster. Um, but I'll add a little tidbit to this isolation aspect because it reminded me of people's self-perceptions, and that there was a lot of research done on positive perceptions and how well you feel about yourself, and that people who had a negative view of themselves, probably by being isolated, did worse on objective measures than people who were basically feeling more confident and happier. The meaning that if you two people next to each other who were initially had a visual acuity or objective measure of being identical, if one came in happy and one came in sad, the happier person would perform better, and the negative person would see things worse, although their objective measures said that they were equal. So your state of mind would basically, no matter how good your lens and your eye is, are equal. If you think of yourself as not being capable, you will perform worse. And
30
isolation.
minutes.
Oh, thank you.
You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much. Great. So I think we're making good time. So the stigma aspect of it is basically the stigma that we internalize and um, the stigma that we tell ourselves and the stigma that we get from the world around us. And maybe we can close off the world around us, but let me tell you, it takes a long time talking from the converted to exercise the stigma demons of how we think we should be and how we're perceived, or how we think we should manage with our vision and our own self-esteem. Um, a big one is inflexible. I think a lot of this talk does require the person, if they're going to have a response shift gives the ideas that things are malleable, and malleable means flexible. There needs to be this notion, I think sometimes here the rehab professionals say, what is it called? Rehab ready. Are you ready to question or change the way you've been doing things for alternative ways of being flexible that may require you to get out of your comfort zone? And that is always a difficult for anyone, particularly when you're losing your vision. Mhm. Oh, should I tell my personal story now? I'll only tell my personal story in the sense that my brush with response shift was basically that I kept my cane hanging on a wall next to me for 5 years, didn't touch it until I accidentally stepped on a puppy's tail, and the guy gave me grief, and I told him I couldn't see it, and he said, "No kidding, you couldn't see it." And then I realized my cane was really not just to help me get around, but was also to help tell other people that I couldn't see things. And anytime I've come close to anything dangerous like that, the world around me becomes much more accepting, and people have moved out of the way before I've ever saw them. So that was my response shift moment where I had to recognize that it really wasn't just about me wanting to be seen as independent and capable. I needed to let the world know that this little puppy did not deserve to have its tail put on me. I thought that's very appropriate for a therapist who caring more about how other people feel than themselves. I'll have to, I'll have to talk to my therapist about that. All right. Um, so why responsive matters to researchers? Well, basically, I'll get, I'm going to speed a bit through this one because I don't think it's as much as a priority, but only to say that it matters to researchers because you want to know whether something's working or not, or whether it's because somebody is having a response shift moment, so to speak, rather than a senior moment. Are they having a response shift moment? Is what they're implementing working, or is the person themselves having their own change of perceptions? Why does it matter to rehabilitation professionals? Well, because, vision rehab professionals want to have successful people that are out in the world being able to read, to do, things that are able to have orientation and mobility. But these things don't stick if you're miserable. You want to know that you're impacting a response shift inside someone so that they want to continue to use their cane. They see benefit from it. They have a personal stake in it, and their subjective experience is willing to alter take in the learning that they're trying to teach. Hmm. So it comes as no surprise that the hidden side, pardon the pun, of vision rehab is really that the functioning is really the surface, but underneath the iceberg is a number of psychological experiences that we're dealing with that are not touched directly during the vision rehab experience, and that psychotherapy, in my opinion, or good friends, a good vision rehab professional could spend time with if you can, but there is a huge part of your psyche which also needs the emotional part and your sense of changing your perceptions, which need to be looked at as well. Hence the hidden side. Okay, so with a little bit time left, I'll just tell you guys that the rapid review that I did of the literature only found response shift being mentioned once in the literature over the past 12 years. So it's it's tempting to go into like, well, what the hell, Josh? Like, we're being neglected here. How come it's not being talked about? Um, and it is and it isn't, because there is a lot of stuff about a subjective experience being looked at. There's a lot of qualitative research always asking, how do you cope? How do you feel? How are you feeling with vision? You rehab, losing your vision. There is a lot of research out there. So why is the term itself not being used? The big why. Well, a lot of it is terminology. A lot of things like adaptation or habituation or things may be confused as meaning response shift, but it's not. So there's a terminology, a lack of understanding, a lot of stuff. But my biggest part of this is that most research and our system deals with generalities. We try and find groups. And as I've mentioned from the top, that response shift is an individual subjective experience which is fluid, that changes over time. And many of these groups and diagnosis and things that are rated and given publishable stuff out in the world like to look at statistics and qualitative measures based on groups and don't have a hard time um, capturing that individual experience in the literature. So it's basically it's a bit systemic, and it's the way the system is designed. But make no mistake, I would argue that many of the visual rehab professionals do see you as individuals. I do not see them seeing you as groups. I just think that there's a bit of a gap in how we try and capture these individual experiences. So I would ask you to think in my closing summation that success is not changing back to who you were. Success is redefining a new meaning of who you are now. And that we like to think that we don't make big changes, but let me tell you, when you were 7 and you were 17 and you were 27, as you progress through time, we have all made adjustments to change in our circumstances as we've had children, as we've adapted to new jobs. We have had response shifts. This just happens to be the biggest response shift you've been faced with that is very difficult because of many of the reasons I've mentioned and not mentioned. So, who we are now moving forward, not trying to claim who we were. So the key messages I would take us with here are that um, quality of life is personal. Changes are more than eyesight. And you don't have to replicate the person that you were. You can kind of find a new meaning of who you are, and then you're not going to try and live in a bubble and not change. I think we all adapt, we all grow, and I think we are as human beings, we're more than just what we see. I think in my life as a psychotherapist, seeing is not always needing is believing. I can't tell you how many times when someone tells me that they feel seen, and that feeling seen is not done with your eyes. It is done with so much more. Um, I'll just put down the resources here, in terms of rehab centers and basic parts in our community that could be looked at. If you needed any more explanation of what these resources may be in your area, I would ask you to reach out to AEBC, and they could probably help you get in touch with someone in your local area to help you find the resources that you may need from this list. And I would thank you very much for listening. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope this message has found you all well. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Joshua. And if anyone, I'm assuming you'll take questions.
I can stick around. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, so if anyone has a question, please put up your hand and I will ask you to unmute and ask your questions. For those of you who have forgotten or have not been on Zoom lately, I don't know who that is. Seems we live on Zoom. On a computer, raising your hand is Alt Y. On a Mac, it's Option Y to unmute once, and on the iPhone, it's under where is it now? Under more. And on the Android, it's under more. And to raise your hand or lower your hand. To unmute, it's Alt A on the computer, Command Shift A on the Mac, and either a double tap with two fingers on an iPhone or iPad, or the mute button, mute, which is down in the bottom left corner, very basically of the screen. And on the phone for raising your hand, it's star 9, and for unmuting, it's star 6. Ah.
That was awesome. I came away from this presentation knowing more than that's awesome.
Oh, so if anybody would like to ask Josh a question or just put your hand up and we'll go from there. And I've got no hands so far.
No hands so far.
Marcy.
Oh, wait. Okay.
It's Chantal.
I've got Diana first, and then Sean, because she actually put her hand up. So
I'm looking for mine and I can't find one. I can find all
it's
kinds
under
of other
4.
hands.
Yeah, it's under 4. It's under more
Sorry.
somewhere.
I
Okay,
looked there.
Diana,
Anyway.
Diana, then Chantal, then Richard. We'll go in that order if that's okay. So Diana.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, there. Now I am.
There
Okay.
you go.
Sorry. Yes. I don't know if this is an answerable question, but I come from a background where I'm a teaching background where I taught kids who were visually impaired. And you talk about how much importance the family is, and I totally agree with you. The only problem is if the family doesn't see you as being able to do anything, you don't believe you can do anything. And the older you get, the harder it seems to be, to move out of that mindset. And I was just wondering if you had any ideas about how to help people really believe that they do. I mean, and I agree with everything you said. I'm not arguing any of that. But how do you get them to actually believe that they actually have those abilities when they've grown up? Well, and I don't even think they don't think they do. They just have no expectations put on them.
Mm-hmm. So what age are we talking about here?
It can start anywhere. I find it's often kids in school. Those are the ones that, and a lot of them were born either with partial vision or totally blind. But the families and to some extent the school system, unfortunately, sees the disability first and the person after. So I am blind, but that's all they see. And they don't see them as growing up and having a family and being, maybe getting married, maybe not. That's not the only important thing, but they don't see them as being employable. And I don't know how to change that mindset.
So I'll answer your question. Thank you for the question, and I think it's a very important one within the framework of, changing perspectives. I come at your question from having experience being a resource aide, paying my way through graduate school, and then being a school psychologist for a while my vision was still good enough to do so. So I have a lot of experience in schools. So I would tell you that if you're dealing with those who don't share that perspective, is that any teacher or educator has to control the controllables. And while that student is in your classroom and you have contact with them, you can control the perspective and how you expect from them and how you perceive them in that moment. You cannot go home with them. You cannot go outside of that immediate setting, but you could impact change with however much time you have in that setting, and that's the best you can do. Other than that, and you challenge them to challenge their perspectives, and in that setting, you could influence change within that very narrow corridor. Otherwise, if the parents themselves are hell-bent on seeing it differently, you're giving that person an experience of having them see through the looking glass very differently, that person does have capacity and that they could see their world differently. And with schools often being a second home, is their community outside of the home, it can influence more change than one may realize. So that's my answer to you in that respect. It's a limited but powerful with the small time that you have to influence that change of perspective, to have those kids change their response, shift within themselves at whatever age.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chantal.
Thank you. We should have booked a 5-hour session because there's a lot of discussion to unpack. And personally, I think I'm walking into a lot of transition time that's going to be happening for me and, different ways of doing things. But asking for a friend, someone who has no more light perception. We talked about calibrating. And I understand the concept of calibrating, and I think of it as calibrating externally, but internally, your brain is recalibrating, to suggest that you can't see anymore. But what time is it? Is it time to wake up in the morning? Is it mid-afternoon? Is it nighttime? This person would like to know if you'd feel comfortable discussing something to do with medication or to let your brain know that it's nighttime. I'm going to bed. I've done everything I can to relax. It's time to sleep versus I can't sleep at night, but in the morning, about 10 o'clock, I could probably have an 8 hour. And so they're finding it difficult now because that's the space they're in. And if you don't feel comfortable or want to answer this question here, are you willing to be contacted later?
Yeah,
Thank
I'd be
you.
willing to compact it later. I think it's beyond the scope of
Right.
the
Yeah.
response shift idea. But I do feel for that person. I'd be delighted to speak with that person to see if I can help them in some other way, offline, so to speak.
I'll put them in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Mhm.
Okay, now Richard, and then Peg had her hand up. And I'm sorry, Peg, but you had noise in the background. That's why I muted you. But you had your hand up. I'm not sure if you want to go after Richard and then
Oh yeah,
Colleen.
no, it's okay. I lowered it because I found what I needed. Thanks.
Okay, all right, just checking. Okay, Richard.
So thanks, Josh, for your presentation. And I was wanted to sort of get your thoughts on blindness and responsive as your body sort of you get other physical impairments. So in my case, I'm congenitally blind, so I've had basically the same level of vision or lack of vision most of my life, other than sort of some minor ailments uh, fluid buildup in my corneas and a recent cataract surgery. But I was wondering what your thoughts are on how you deal with. To me, I haven't just figured out, is it because am I more fearful of doing of for example, like I'm getting osteoarthritis, so am I more fearful of falling because of my blindness than say someone else that's in the same has the same physical ailment as me, or is it just more general fear of falling, period? Because when I was younger, I thought nothing of running through parking lots with a white cane flailing in front of me, falling on on one of those parking curbs, and then getting back up and continuing my run to catch the bus that I was trying to catch at a bus stop. Nowadays, if I did that, I would probably injure myself significantly, even though maybe not any more than I would have when I was younger. But so, like, if I go to new areas now, it's even though I still consider my O&M skills good, I still have more sort of trepidation about sort of venturing out of my comfort zone, and I'm not sure if it's because of my lack of vision, or if it's just more the issue to with the sort of deteriorating physical condition of my body as I get older.
Maybe both. I mean,
Yeah.
it's these things are not very a hard line. They can be very discreet. I think with the people that I've spoken to with and without a vision impairment, getting older does make you more risk adverse. So how much you may feel these things more than someone who is sighted or has perfect sighting, I don't think anyone could really answer that. Really. I think that if you do have already a pre-existing condition of something like a vision or sensory problem, and you're already feeling physical pain, then you may be more sensitive to it than someone else who doesn't have a vision problem, because it makes sense. You have a higher risk of falling down, so why not be a bit more trepidatious? To the extent that you do not go out as much and want to question how much it impacts your quality of life, that would be questioning, I guess, how much of you this is affecting, how much your change of beliefs or your evaluation of yourself is shifting the response shift, so to speak, to change the way you would like to live your highest quality of life. So that would be something to talk about either with your doctor to minimize the pain, talk to an O&M person to make sure that you can still get to the things that you want to, that you're not isolating yourself because you're fearful, but are you mitigating that risk with the right skills and the right, possible treatment, medication, what have you?
Yeah, and that I am, like, I'm still like that I am doing. It's just that the thought process of doing things kind of everything factors into it, and blindness more so now than it ever used to before, because it
Sure.
was
Oh yeah, well factor.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
definitely. Yeah,
yeah,
response shift doesn't it can go both ways. I mean, it could go towards being protective. Your prioritization of your own personal integrity and safety is ranked higher because we are more frail. Things take longer to heal, so yeah, even without a major osteoarthritis or any inflammation, we get older, it takes longer to heal, we become more risk adverse. So I would say it's probably quite normal. Hmm.
okay, thanks, thank you.
You're welcome.
Karen, you're unmuted. Did you want to ask a question?
No,
Hi. No?
no.
Okay. I thought you might have unmuted for a reason. Okay. So I've got no more hands at the moment if anyone wants to ask a question. Okay. Enza,
Oops, I think I just unmuted myself.
you did. You're
Okay,
fine.
great.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for a great, really super informative presentation.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
I do have a question for you. for somebody who's dealing with this right now
Mm.
and does have a great family and phenomenal resources, as I'm going through my, what I will use your term, response shift. How on earth do I shift all of society along the way with me?
Ah, yeah. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna just say, for the sake of clarity, maybe my question should be managing perhaps my own frustration as I'm growing through this, but every single time I step out the door and with my cane, everything has to be, it has to end up being a teachable moment for somebody else who, I don't know, the light has changed and they'll literally yoink me to run me across the street and startle me and go, thanks, but like maybe next time you might want to just need help, right? It's like, how do I manage not feeling dumbed down or frustrated by people whom ever so kind just don't know how to deal with a person with a cane?
Mm. How long have you been dealing with these teachable moments?
I progressively lost my vision, was fully functioning till about 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
left my work, where
mm,
I got to the point I couldn't read anymore, and I see
okay.
light and whatever. So I'll say it's been these last 2 years trying all my best to again. I recognize so dearly what you have shared, it's just everything rings so home. And I
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
it as we go through this from a therapy and a support point of view, how do we take care of ourselves so that we don't get we don't get exhausted, keep our energy for shifting ourselves and not getting frustrated or exhausted when people just don't get it.
When you
So,
figure that out, let me know.
I could only offer my heartfelt appreciation so far on you sharing that because that is probably fundamental for like the vast majority of people that are dealing with their vision loss. So, if you were to kind of put your story and superimpose it, I would say there would be a over 90% of familiarity with most people who are losing their vision, particularly over the
Mm.
first 2 years. So first off, you're not alone because that sounds like a carbon copy of frustration, dealing with the world. Every moment seems to be a teaching moment. So how do I deal with this? So I would only offer a couple of things. One is that the visual system in our brain is basically interconnected with about 30% of our brain. So the occipital lobe in the back of our brain, there's a point to this, so bear with me. So basically our the way we perceive the world, the way we understand things, 30%, if not more, interconnected with our visual system. We are asking society to kind of uh, see the world through our eyes when it just comes so natural to kind of do things. So the world will, we are going to wait for the world to kind of get us, I don't think that's the goal.
Okay.
Uh, so that might be a good cross to put down. My thought has always been is that every moment is a teachable moment for them. It's not just you are screwing up all the time. You can educate others around you and not to be the preachy kind of like, as you're crossing the street, you're telling all, about your aches and pains and adversities. But it's like, can that help you cross the street? Yes. Do you mind if I grab your elbow? Like you ask them they ask you, and you're like, this is what I need. Because they're just going to grab you. They're going to grab your cane. They're going to push you across the street or whatever. And people get furiated with that, but they don't take the opportunity to say, you know, I know you're trying to help me, but I'd rather you not grab my wrist. Can I grab your elbow? It's so much more comfortable. And I can explain why, it's better guidance, it's more easy, it's less invasive. And we were like, oh, they don't know. They don't get it. You know how many times they've said, well, you could sit over here if there's a
Yeah.
you're like, well, where's here? Right? Your whole language system, our whole way of kind of engaging the world verbally is based on a visual terminology. So it's it's going to have to be this notion of you are slipping into a world which is kind of distancing yourself from that shared reality, which is visual, right? But you're still a person. You still deserve respect. You still deserve to be, pardon the pun, seen as a person. And
Mhm.
I would offer to you that if you see yourself as a person who's just different and that you have certain needs and that we need to be, and I'm not going to say you, but we, because I'm still always trying to figure it out, we need to be responsible to let those needs be told to those who aren't living in that world.
Mhm.
And that will help a lot. Most people want to know, don't even know how to ask the question because they don't live in that world. They don't have that terminology.
Mhm.
Does that make any sense?
So much sense.
Okay. All
So
right.
much sense. Thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Enza.
Mm.
Thank you.
Okay, and anyone else? And I'm just going to lower your hand, Enza. So, anyone else?
I will offer to say before we close up, if no one does have anything, if people are nervous, if people don't feel comfortable sharing something in this setting, you're more than welcome to email me, to call me, carrier pigeon, whatever it is. You can reach out to me in some other way through AEBC or my coordinates are online. I have a little bit of stuff about me on different types of Google searches. I'd be happy to talk to you in some other setting that you may feel more comfortable.
Great. And since Joshua has said yes, if anyone emails us, we will pass on his email address. Not a
Hmm.
problem. Great. Well, thank you. This has been illuminating, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken to put this presentation together and to present it to us. And
Thank you,
we
Marcia.
we really appreciate it.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for checking out our content. To learn more about the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, please visit www.blindcanadians.ca. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe.